Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Nerve Guys podcast, where we discuss movement from the point of view of the brain. My name is James. I will be your host, and today's episode is brought to you by the Neuroband, which I realized I'm wearing upside down. I guess it's the right way around. It's upside down when I wear it for camera. We'll talk about that at the end. Today, we're going to be talking about whether or not trauma is stored in the hips. So this was a question posed to me, not specifically a request to do a podcast about it, but I'm going to do a podcast about it. Feel free, if you've got any topics you would like us to cover. So far, I've been able to hit every one of them. As the number increases, we'll see, but I will do my best to cover any questions that you guys have. But this one's kind of important to me because, as a statement, I think it's false, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But it also highlights like a really interesting thing about concepts in general when it comes to, I guess, science. A lot of the time, the statements that we make are not an attempt to say the truth. They're actually just an attempt to simplify things into a story that's useful for somebody else. So that's essentially what we're doing today. I'm going to talk about why trauma is not stored in your hips and why some people still say it, and it might not always be a bad thing. So probably you'll be familiar with the idea of trauma when you deal with a negative situation that is so bad or persists for so long that your brain is constantly looking for a way to escape, and your brain is unable to process it in any kind of significant way. The end result is trauma. Basically what happens is your brain will remember as many of the circumstances that led up to your situation, and when those circumstances present themselves again, you will start to find that you start looking for ways to escape. This is going to have a profound effect on your behavior later in life, and it's going to cause weird things when it comes to like reactions and stuff like that. Now, I'm going to try not to go too much into trauma itself today because I don't want to have to put a trigger warning on this. But what I do want to talk about is why some people might think that experiencing trauma leads to a physical change in your body that can be released through massage therapy, basically. So when you're experiencing something negative and your brain is trying to alter your behavior in order to protect you from experiencing that thing again, there's a number of different things that it can do. So one of the big things you'll find if your brain wants to stop you from engaging in an activity, it can change your emotional system. So, most people are familiar with triggers of like fear and anxiety and that kind of thing. But it can also change physical things in your body. The easiest way it can do this is through pain. So, there's research to show that in lower back pain, the best predictor for whether somebody is dealing with lower back pain or not isn't what's going on in the spine. It's not like, if you have a herniated disc or something like that, it's actually job satisfaction. When you go to work and every day it sucks, it doesn't have to be like such a high level that, we're going to call it trauma or anything like that, but you wake up with that dread every single morning. Well, one of the more useful ways that your brain can get you to stop going into work is to start giving you pain and actually making it painful to move. The lower back is a really good place to do this because in your lower back, when your lower back hurts, it's hard to connect your upper and lower bodies together. It makes it really hard to walk, makes it really hard to, reach for things. People say, coughing, laughing, sneezing, all of those things can be agonizing. So pain actually can be a really good way to stop you moving around. Now, in addition to this, another thing that would be really useful if your brain doesn't want to be giving you pain all the time, what if it was to tighten up your muscles? So when your muscles are lengthened, if your muscles lengthen out really, really long, especially in like compromising positions. So if you imagine doing the splits or reaching your arms way up behind your head, it only takes a little bit of force to cause quite a significant amount of damage. And one of the easiest ways to prevent that from happening is we make those muscles chronically tight. So we tighten them up so that they struggle to be able to move past a certain point. It could even be a way of like slowing the body down. So if it tries to engage in action, you can't even move as fast as before. And so when we're dealing with trauma, it's probably reasonable to say that a good place to tighten up muscles to prevent you from rushing, let's use a kind of physical metaphor, to prevent you rushing too hard into dangerous situations again, would be the glutes. Big muscles, when you tighten them up, actually, it makes moving around fatiguing, it makes it tiring. If all of these things become tiring, you're more likely to stay put where you are than you are to go off into dangerous territory. So it is possible, and I don't think there's like a lot of evidence to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is just a potential reason why you could say that a lot of people that have come to the conclusion trauma is stored in the hips, because when, if you're a massage therapist and you're dealing with people who say they've had trauma, you get the hips and the hips are super tight. And that could very much be a reason why. You also see with lower back pain, actually, hips tend to tense up and the whole kind of area around there starts to try and brace to protect the lower back. So this could happen in other types of chronic pain as well, but maybe people are making more of the connection when it comes to trauma. The other thing that could happen is if this has actually happened, if your brain has decided as a protection mechanism, it's going to tighten up in the hips, then what you're going to find is you could actually have some physical triggers related to the traumatic experience itself, specifically when you try to address the hips and you try to move anything. When you start focusing on the hips or the glutes and why they're not moving as much as they used to, and maybe you start doing some manual manipulation work and stuff, then it's very likely that actually the brain goes, hey, this is moving. When was the last time this moved like this? Oh yeah, I remember. And things come flooding back in. Where the problem is, I think, is to say that this means that the actual traumatic event itself is stuck in the hips is super misleading, because then you get the idea that if I just do enough massage therapy, I can actually relieve myself of this problem. Like, if the problem is located here, then once I get this bit sorted out, I can be functioning how I was before, essentially. And we know absolutely with trauma that that's not how it works. There's going to be some element of change that happens as a result of these things that happen to you. And while it might be true, if you are experiencing triggers and things like that from movement in the hips, then potentially improving moving in the hips might actually relieve some of that load. But I think it's really misleading to say that the entire problem is located there. I think that's one of the things that our modern culture actually encourages is, when people go to therapy, when people go to physios, they don't want to find out that a lot of the problem is this holistic thing about their own bodies and how they're relating to themselves, and that there's a huge journey about like discovering yourself in a bit of a better way. The thing that caused the problem might not have been anything to do with you, or it might not have been your fault, but because of the things that have happened to you, you now have like a different journey to embark on than the trajectory you might currently have been on. What we want to hear is that the problem is this, I fix this, so come to me. Spend your money on this problem and we will make it go away. And unfortunately, that is what sells tickets, that is what people buy into, and that's kind of where we're at today. So with that in mind, is it a terrible thing that people are saying a statement that's not true? I think not necessarily. As I said at the start, a lot of the time when we give a simple story like this, it's to kind of help people understand a piece of the jigsaw in a way that helps their brain with the healing. So we know from the placebo effect that if you put your brain into the right mindset, you will get a greater effect from effective treatment than you will if you put it into the wrong mindset. You can take a treatment that actually works, but if you're thinking in the wrong way about it, it won't work as well as if you're in a kind of positive mindset. So when you give somebody a story that's like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me, this explains why I feel a little bit better when I do movement on my hips, then that actually can go a long way to relieving a huge part of the problem. Than if you were to say, yeah, your hips are tight, you need to stretch them, you also need to do this, and this. However, I guess the thing that we then have to be mindful of is the fact that if you give somebody hope that this one thing is going to solve the whole problem, and then it doesn't, and then they have to go through that process 100 more times until it's fixed, the chances of them ever getting to stage number 100 is super low. So I'm going to leave that on a kind of depressing low for this episode. I'm curious to know what you think about all this, and if you think there are better ways to approach it and better ways to deal with it. Also, if you think knowing those better ways will actually help to change it. So one of the big issues I come up against is just because we know that speaking like this maybe isn't healthy or useful, the kind of capitalism side of things makes it so that you still have to play the game a little bit, whether you're the patient or the practitioner, in order to keep the process going. And so at the moment, it feels like we still are just asking for, no, give me the magic, one pill fixes everything approach, rather than looking for the journey approach to come to grips with things. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you for watching. Thanks for sharing your comments in advance. If you enjoyed this, you'd like to support the podcast, I would highly recommend checking out the Neuroband. The Neuroband is basically a course for training your vision and vestibular systems. It's done in a kind of neutral way, so it's just 2 mini workouts that you can use to kind of stimulate these systems, get you kind of integrated and well connected for the morning. Then in the evening, you can try a slightly more challenging version to like work out these systems and hopefully recover in your sleep. And what we find is overall kind of posture, coordination, focus all tend to improve when we get our eyes and our inner ear working in a more connected and integrated fashion. So you'll find a link in the description, wherever that might be. Please check it out. If you would like to purchase one, it would really help out the podcast. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.